Good morning to all our listeners, which is another version of our True Business Stories happening today. And we've got a really interesting guest, which Bill will introduce in a minute. And keeping with, I suppose, our international flavour that's crept in occasionally, Keith, our guest, comes from Canada, but we'll more about that. So, Bill, tell us about our guest.
Yes, good morning, Mark, and thank you. And good morning, Keith. How are you?
Good morning to you both. I'm fine today.
Good. So today we are going to talk to Keith Christenson. I've known Keith, I'd hate to think for how long I've known you, Keith, but it is a long time, and we've been really, I guess, good personal friends. And I first came across you when you owned a travel company in Melbourne. And these days, Keith, I consider you to be the expert in developing and implementing travel incentives for companies. And I know that you've done some remarkable, conventions, and for a number of large companies, or I guess large and small. So I thought it would be good for our listeners today just to hear about some of your opinions on why travel incentives are good for business.
So, Keith, where did life begin for you? Were you born in Canada?
Yes, I was born in Toronto in 1949.
Excellent city.
Yeah, great city. But if you've probably seen the news forecast for the last couple of days, lots of snow.
Yes, very cold. And did your schooling start in Toronto? What was your first early schooling, and did you go to university?
I finished high school in grade 13 in Canada in 1968, and with the difference in school years, I worked for 6 months, and then I came to university here in Melbourne. My brother had married an Australian girl and was living in Melbourne, and my mother thought it was a good idea for me to get under some male influence because my father had died when I was very young. So off I came to Australia, and I've stayed ever since.
Wow. And what did you do at uni? What was your degree?
I did commerce, but I never actually finished it because I ran out of money, as it were, and being a foreign student, we had to pay our way. And so I started working. I did 2 years of uni and with the intention of going back, but never actually did. Started out working for a tennis company, selling tennis rackets around Australia. And then went into the travel industry after 3 or 4 years because I wanted to get free flights home.
And what was the first company in travel that you worked for?
So I worked for a travel wholesaler in Sydney. It was called Cavalier Tours, and they represented companies from overseas. It was when Qantas first started the 747s to Europe, and they were doing little stopover packages.
Yep.
And so we started doing that, and I started selling those to travel agencies for Australia, and then actually going and doing some contracting with work for the people that we represented. And then incentives weren't really available in Australia at that time, but they were in America. Mainly in what they called pots and pans, so merchandise. But Pan American was big at that time, and with their assistance, I flew over to New York to their head office, and I stayed with them for about 2 months, learning all about incentives. I went to some of the big incentive houses throughout America, and really learned about how incentives operate and what they were, and then came back to Australia, and with the company Cavalier Tours, we set up an incentive house.
Well, Keith, I think I first met you working. You had your own company at one stage, didn't you? Was it Travel Associates? Was that the name of?
Conference Associates.
Oh, Conference Associates. Travel Associates was the previous one.
When I was working with Venture Holidays.
Venture Holidays. Yes, I remember that.
And I was running the incentive programs for Venture Holidays, and then we set up our own company and started doing it from there.
Now, just going back to Pan Am, you mentioned Pan Am. I've done some flights with you on Pan Am 747s in those days. And
Yes.
I recall a trip to Hawaii where I don't think we ever sat in our seat. We just stood at the bar down the back of the plane all the
Well,
way.
in those days they had the what was called the dining room in the sky as well, and they had in the dome they set up an actual restaurant, if you recall. We used to be able to go and have dinner up there.
That's right. It's and I would hate to. Have you ever logged how many trips you've done? Because you're probably the most travelled person I've ever met.
No, I have no idea. I
Yeah.
have no idea. It's when it comes to looking at places like Hawaii or Bali or even Europe, it's in more than 50 of each, I guess.
All right. And just going back to the personal side, you mentioned selling tennis rackets. I think I heard you just say, but I know these days you've swapped tennis rackets for golf sticks, and I know you're a keen golfer. And
That's right.
and you and I have had a running battle for years playing for our. In fact, you probably still have the cup. I think you beat me more times than I beat you. And another interesting thing, Mark, which I'll tell you just about Keith, to just give you an idea of what he's been up to, is that Keith is a member of Eastern Suburbs Hash House Harriers, and they run every Monday night around the suburbs of, or the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. Now, Keith, how many runs has Hash done, and how many runs have you completed over those years?
I think we're up to about 2,800 runs, and I've done well over 1,000 of them.
So, Mark, there's 2,800 Monday nights.
That's fantastic.
Right?
That's fantastic.
And they always finish with a beer.
So, Keith, so your current business, tell us a bit about it. What does it do? Who are your customers?
Okay, I'm retired now, but over the past, we used to do large corporations. Mobil Oil was probably one that comes to mind the most, because we did them for many, many years, doing incentive programs and conferences, the largest of which was about 1,500 in Los Angeles, where we had President Reagan as a main speaker, and we did some amazing activities at the Spruce Goose and all over the place. It was that's probably the biggest I've done. I've for Mitre 10 we did over 1,000 in Shanghai and 400 in Beijing, with dinner and fireworks on the Great Wall. Doing incentive programs is a real privilege, because you get to spend other people's money to make people happy. And I mean, you can't do any worse than that. It's great. It's the best job in the entire world.
So, Keith, just talking about incentives, and everybody's now in today's environment, we keep hearing about the lack of available staff, etc. And one of the big issues for any business is the retention of staff. So, what are your thoughts on using travel incentives as one of the tools that business owners or businesses can use to, improve the retention of staff?
Oh, it's probably one of the best things you can possibly do, because an incentive program is a specialized travel program that they say money can't buy, but of course you can buy it because you're spending it. But you're giving experiences that are just amazing, that they just couldn't go to the local travel agent and buy. And once people get on an incentive trip, they just want to continue to go with their friends. I remember many years ago, we did an incentive for Nissan to Fiji. And I was sitting there with some of the ladies, and they were saying, complaining about their husbands working so hard and having to do so much work and not being home for dinner and doing things. And they said, oh, yeah, not like such and such, who he gets home all the time and he's wonderful. And they said, well, where is he? Oh, he didn't make the incentive this year. He didn't make his targets. And then just the light dawned in all these women's eyes. And it was quite an amazing moment.
That's very good. So you will have seen over your career airlines come and go, Pan Am being one. What's some of your favourite airlines? What sort of airlines have you got strong affiliation for?
Look, because I used to travel so much, it was just part of my life. Pan Am was always one of the best. I always reckon. It was a shame when they left. I travel a lot with Qantas because I have platinum status there, and that's very good. But I personally, Emirates is one of my favorites because, particularly on their large aircraft, the A380, they've got that wonderful little bar at the back, and that's terrific. That's probably the best airline to travel on. The best aircraft to travel on is the A380.
And travel tips for people. How do you travel? Do you travel light? Do you do carry on? Do you in these days worry about checked baggage? What's
Well, when I was traveling for business, I used to never travel light because I used to have to do so many things.
Yeah.
When I was going to conferences and running programs, I might have up to 100 kilos of luggage. So
Wow.
I sort of got used to it. I guess my nowadays we bought those little Apple tags to put in our bags,
Yep.
and I think that's a good idea. But my one piece of advice for anybody is never wear your socks into the men's room.
In fact, I read about it. Just, I'll go back, Keith. I'll go back to Pan Am again. One of my claims to fame was that I was a life member of Pan Am Clipper Club, and a lot of use that's done me now that they've disappeared off the earth. Convention venues, Keith. And I know you've been to convention venues in all sorts of countries around the world. Do you want to nominate a couple of the top venues you've been to?
Look, I've been to most of them. I guess the biggest ones are in Europe and Germany, the messes and things, and they're quite enormous. I mean, you talk about thousands and thousands and thousands of people for exhibitions and what have you. But I prefer, when we do things I prefer to do them for the smaller groups of 100 or 200 people and use some of the bigger hotels or more boutique areas that you can do because they're a bit more fun and a bit more flexible. Some of those larger convention centers are so inflexible with what they want to do. And for an incentive program or for what we do, because we used to run in conventions like an incentive, we like to do things a bit differently. And a lot of the larger venues are government regulated or run like governments, and they just don't have flexibility.
I recall, Keith, that on a couple of occasions you've had to take your own wine with you out of Australia to ensure that you were able to look after your clients properly.
Absolutely, and we used to do it. I mean, it's a lot harder nowadays, but certainly to places like Bali or Hong Kong, and even to Hawaii, where the prices of wines were incredibly expensive for the quality that you get. We used to go and we used to pay for corkage and make sure that they had a good quality, and people appreciate that.
It's interesting listening to your conventions, and I in my past life attended the Canton Fair a number of times. That's enormous. That's just hall after hall. And I remember walking into one hall and it was all grand pianos, and then the next one was all drum kits. I think it would take days to wander your way through. So I get, if you've got such a big place like that, it becomes very impersonal. It's very hard to get around and chat to people and meet people. So understand your understanding of smaller venues. Yeah. You're aware.
One of the things we used to do is we used to do a lot of study tours where we take groups of particularly retailers over to these large international marketplaces, as it were, maybe 100, 150 people, and then we would take over our own little area and run our own little events within these big events, and invite some of the local people to come and be with us, and that was a very, very good way of doing things. So we do that, and then go and look at some of the local areas that were pertinent to the people that we were dealing with.
Yeah, the Westfield used to do a regular retail tour. Were you involved in those ones?
No, but I'm aware of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hear of many these days. I think COVID sort of killed that business for a while, and maybe it's starting
Well,
to resurrect.
well, it has for the last couple of years, but they're coming back again, and you'll find that nowadays they try to keep them a little bit under the newsworthy eye because people don't like it. I mean, the banks have been involved in doing those things quite lavishly for a while. We never were involved with the banks, but they got in the news from on the wrong side of it because of all the huge money they were spending on them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember many years ago in my MD at Target where I worked was adamant that we had to travel, and he sent us to shows and trade shows all over the world because he said if you don't travel and you don't see, you're not going to learn. And I can remember talking to peers in other retail businesses that didn't travel because they saw it as an expense. So it's interesting.
All right, Keith, just changing from talking about airlines and that, what about cruise ships? And I know that you have done a number of cruises. Are cruise ships an option for incentive travel?
They are, and there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is that you can charter the entire vessel, which is ideal, but numbers are tough and not everybody likes them. Or you can take a portion of it. You might take 20, 30, 40% of the ship. It's not been as widely accepted as I think it should have been, because I think that the cruising offers the best value for money you can find. It's got absolutely everything on it. And in the first instance, they didn't offer flexibility, but they've come around and now do give you flexibility. One thing they have to watch out is other passengers. If you're not taking the entire ship, they've got to watch out for the rest of the passengers on the ship, because if you've got 1/3 and you're dominating everything, it can make it a bit uncomfortable for some of the other people.
So Keith, what are you doing now? So you say you've retired. Did you sell your business, or is someone running it for you? What's?
I sold out of the business about 15 years ago and continued on as an employee. And I retired in 2016, really, but I continued to work as a bit of an outside contractor. In fact, for one company I've been dealing with for 23 years, and I'm still doing some stuff for them just up to this year.
So you're still doing consulting, etc.
Yeah, and a little bit of mentoring and just helping out if they need a bit of ideas of what's going on.
And do you see from your experience, do you see the travel industry starting to come back now? Do you think, we've heard lots of stories about Qantas and Virgin and Jetstar all losing bags and cancelled flights, and is from your experience and connections, do you see that improving?
It's going to have to. It's going to have to because it's just unacceptable what's happening at the moment. I mean, it's the old story: you get what you pay for, and low-cost airlines like Jetstar are very. We wouldn't use one of those for an incentive program because they're just not quality enough.
Yeah, and having a number of planes. If a plane's cancelled, there's not necessarily a spare plane, isn't there?
No, there's not. There's not, and so you really have to watch that. Certainly, with incentive travel, during COVID, it just went to God, really. The incentive company that I was working for, I was doing mostly travel, but it also did other things such as pots and pans and credit cards and such. So they were able to survive quite well. But a lot of the smaller ones just went by the wayside.
Keith, just on another question about Australia, what would you say would be the best place in Australia that you have held taken a group to a convention or to a incentive program?
Well, the Gold Coast has traditionally out of Victoria been a big one because particularly in the winter months, we did one as I said for this company that I've been dealing with for a long time to Darwin this year, and Darwin was fantastic. Darwin is a great incentive destination, lots to do, lots to see, and as long as you go in the good weather, it's a fantastic spot. The Gold Coast, far north Queensland, up to Port Douglas, Cairns is good. We've done a lot up there. Those are the main ones.
As you may or may not be aware, Keith, down in our little neck of the woods, Geelong's in the process of building a convention centre. 1,000-seat planetarium is the size. If you were at the ground floor of designing a convention centre, what are the three things that you think are really important for people visiting? Putting you on the spot here.
No, the people that you employ are the most important things. And you've got to be flexible. I think audiovisual is always a real key component. The trouble is you can never really keep it up to date for more than 6 or 7 months because it just changes all the time. So the convention centers that try to put their own stuff in is it never seems to work. So you want to be able to make sure that you can allow outside people in. A lot of the convention centers try to run it all themselves and make extra profits, but they really stuff it up. And you need ease of access for moving things in and out, such as trade exhibitions or cars and trucks and all that sort of stuff. That's important. And then, of course, the food and beverage offering is absolutely critical.
Actually, that's really good because I'm involved with the Geelong Convention Centre, and they're exactly some of the topics we've been talking about, and that the technology is vital to having that being able to link up around the world these days because not everyone wants to travel but wants to participate in conferences. And there's been a lot of discussion about the technology and how that gets handled. So, yeah, that's very interesting. Good advice.
Well, if you want me to help you, Mark, just give us a bell and I'm happy to come down and have a chat or something sometime.
I've got my notes.
Mark, another aspect to touch on the personal side now is that not that many years ago, Keith and I took up Masters Triathlons. And as you recall, Keith, I think we got into a bit of trouble because we were never home. We were running every morning or every second morning. We were swimming in a master swim squad the other times. And then on the weekends, we'd take off on our bikes for the long rides. I guess, what are you doing these days to keep the fitness level up?
Well, I certainly remember those days because we used to get up, Bill, at like 5:30 in the morning and go for our swims. And my wife thought it was a good idea to start with, but by the time 5 o'clock came in the afternoon, I'd be falling asleep in my suit. So that was tough. These days, of course, as you know, Bill, I had a back operation on just before Christmas. So I haven't been able to do as much as I like, but I walk a lot now. I play golf a couple of times a week, and when I'm not, I make sure that I walk 6 to 8 Ks a day, and that's the doctor said that's the best thing you can do to get your back together. As you know, I played rugby up until 55, so my back was a bit of a mess. And my doctor said if I was a horse, they would have shot me.
I forgot about that, Keith. Your passion for rugby, and I think you suffered a few injuries, didn't you, playing for the Golden Oldies?
Oh yes. I think I've broken most of my bones, and when I check into the hospital, and they said, "Well, what have you had done before?" I just said I played rugby. Everything's gone.
So thank you, Keith. That's being a fascinating discussion. I've got to know a little bit more about you, and very insightful your comments on travel and the convention world, and appreciate you joining Bill and I today. Yeah,
thank you, Keith. As I said in the intro, I don't think anybody knows more than you would ever know on incentive travel, and I think as I said before, you've flown more miles than most people I know. And one last thank you for Keith, Mark, is that Keith arranged for me to go on the Concorde from New York to London one day, and it's an experience I'll never forget because I got to sit in the cockpit.
Wow.
Because the captain of the plane was a POM, the tests were on, and he found out I was an Aussie, and he said, "Come up here and sit with me, I want to talk about cricket." Anyway, thank you, Keith. It's been great talking to you. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, and good luck with the podcast. I've been listening to them, and they're very good.
Good.
Thank you.